everybody, can you believe it? We're halfway there. I've had the privilege of dealing with some of you at this point. You're doing phenomenal. I need you to just stay strong. Let's keep going, and before you know it, we'll be out of marketing and we'll dive into management. Today's lesson is going to be found in Chapter 6, Setting Menu Prices. This can be confusing for a lot of people, but I'm going to try to break it down so that you can understand what you need to do to set the proper menu prices at your establishment. Now, the seller's view of price is different for everybody. There's different levels of willingness and ability to pay. So, you know, everybody's going to view a price differently and they're going to value it differently. So we need to at least make sure that we're pricing accordingly to help us to stay in business. Remember, I said in our last chapter, we're in business to make money so that we can stay in business. So let's look at a couple of different types of menus. Of course, there is the a la carte menu, which is where you go in and you buy specific menu items and it's lined out. The prices are next to that and you pick and choose individually what your menu item is. And then there's what's called a prefix menu. That would be something like a special occasion menu where you have a $75 for a buffet and it's all you can eat buffet. Those are prefix menus. You know, typically I'm thinking like Mother's Day, Valentine's Day, things like that. A establishment will offer prefix menus where they only have a select item or items that they're going to offer and it's for a set price. Okay, so now a business cost. A business cost is the price paid to obtain or produce an item required to operate a business. That is a business cost, and there's a lot of things that go into that. There's food, there's labor, supplies, rent. Those are all things that go into the business cost. It's not just your food cost or the money spent to purchase your food. There's a whole host of other things that go into that. Now, let's talk about the buyer's view of price. For buyers, only one factor is important. Okay, I need you to make sure that you remember that, and that's their perceived value. If they walk into your establishment and they perceive that your high-end menu is worth the $100 that they're going to pay, then guess what? They're going to pay it. Now, if they walk into your establishment and they're getting a cheeseburger and you're claiming to be a high-end restaurant, they don't perceive that as value. So their value is based, I mean, their perceived value is what encourages them to buy or not buy. Now, the importance of proper pricing. Managers must know how to price their products that they manufacture. You know, proper pricing is interesting because it is kind of a balance of science and art. You can't put a price on service. Service is intangible, but service can elevate the perceived value of what you're offering. So don't underestimate your level of service. Now, again, managers responsible for pricing should remember these three specific points. I need you to highlight those points because I think down the road, and I'm on page 131. Can you believe it? We're on page 131. If you look there on page 131 at the top, managers responsible for pricing should remember these 3 points when making final pricing decisions. This is what you need to consider when you start setting up those prices for your menu or your establishment. 1, prices act as signs to buyers. Okay, they're what you advertise with. You're when they look at that menu, you're advertising your product with that menu and that price. You're letting them know what are they going to get from you for those dollars. Now, prices must reflect real cost. Now, you can't sit there and prices must reflect real cost. Proper pricing recognizes that food, labor, and other operation expenses must be considered when calculating menu prices. Okay, so what does that mean? Inside of your menu price, it's not just the cost of your food. It's your operating cost, it's your profit, it's anything else necessary to be in that price for you to stay in business. So it honestly, it kills me. I see people all the time, and again, because I'm a pastry chef, I'm going to use a cupcake as an example. I see people all the time, they advertise and they want to sell a cupcake for $1. Well, if you do your food cost alone on that cupcake, if you actually get you a software, or if you manually do your food cost, and you will learn how to price out and cost your menu items, your recipes, in cost control, if you do that, you'll quickly learn that it costs you way more than $1 to sell that to produce that cupcake. So to sell it for $1, you're losing money. You're wasting your time. You're working for nothing. You're not even covering turning on your oven. So how to calculate real cost in your menu pricings, it's important. Prices must be considered fair. You cannot have any unhidden cost. You can't have, you can't charge $100 for a cookie. It has to be fair, okay? It has to be real value for the money that your customer spends. Now let's look at some external factors affecting pricing. One is competition. Obviously, status quo is very important. You don't want to price yourself out of your competitors. You do not want to take an offering and make it 10 times higher than what your competitors have on their menus or what they're offering. Guess what? I'm going to go to your competitor. I'm not going to come to you. Economic conditions. Again, we're looking now at economic conditions. You need to look around. What are the economics like? What's going on in your community? You need to look at that. Food trends. Again, here we go. Food trends. Food trends can add to your bottom line, but you need to make sure that you're on top of those and that you're pricing those fairly. Let's talk about seasonality of foods. If you're going to offer, well, what would be seasonal? If you're going to offer a menu item that requires a fresh produce, let's think about watermelon, okay? If you're going to use watermelon in your dish, I'm just throwing that out there. And it's out of season, obviously you're going to pay more to get it in. Or I'm trying to think of something else that would be seasonal. Some sort of herbs, vegetables. There's seasons for everything. Strawberries, I can think of strawberries. Strawberries out of season cost more to purchase than when they're in season. So you need to think about that. And pricing related laws, okay? Pricing related laws, again, they fall under that. You can't have hidden cost. You can't not foreclose what all's in your, you can not foreclose. Basically, it's illegal to have hidden charges, okay? You have to justify your menu price. Now, some internal factors that affect pricing are your financial goals. If by next year you want to have an increase in revenue, your pricing may reflect that. You may have that 10% built into your menu pricing to help you achieve that goal. Food cost, okay? Food cost definitely affects your pricing. Whatever the cost of your food is, that's what your menu price has to reflect. Labor cost. You know, we really don't think about our labor cost being in our menu pricing, but our labor cost has to be within our menu pricing as well. And we'll look at that a little more in a few moments. Let's talk about other operating expenses. What actually is an other cost or an other operating expense? Those are things like your rent, your insurance, bank charges, kitchen equipment, menu wine list. I mean, if you look at Exhibit 6.9, there are a ton full on that list that is considered your other operating costs. Now, the one thing I want to back up to, if you notice I've got up here, revenue minus your expense equals your profit, okay? Your profit is built into your menu pricing. It's built into that. So whatever your sales are, whatever you take in, minus whatever you spend, be it on labor, be it on rent, be it on food costs, that's all included in your expense, okay? Now, once you've taken in your sales and then you've deducted your expenses, that is your profit there, okay? So definitely make sure you highlight that right there on page 135. Revenue minus your expenses is what equals your profit, whatever your expenses are. We've already talked about our food cost. When we look at food costs, again, there's several things that factor into food costs that we need to think about. Theft. If you're in the restaurant industry, unfortunately, I mean, we would love to say we trust all of our employees, but in reality, somebody's putting a beef tenderloin in a cooler and carrying it out the back door. Or I heard a story of one restaurant where the employee was literally putting food into trash bags and he was throwing it into the dumpster, and then a friend would come along and get it out of the trash. So as much as we want to sit here and say that we can trust our employees, you know, do you really, can you trust them? I mean, I would love to think I can trust everybody, but when it comes to your bottom dollars and when it comes to your money, no one's going to look after it the way you do. And you know, sometimes you're putting these employees in place of trust, and you're tempting them, and you just need to watch that. Food loss to spoilage. How much food do you purchase actually spoils before you get a chance to use it? Those herbs in this big old box that you ordered, and you use half of them and the rest of them sit there because you don't need them. So that affects your food cost. Also, food lost in preparation. This one's kind of always hit home with me because in first quarter, okay, I think about all the knife skills, the food that we chopped up, the items that we've prepared in the lab classes. How many times have you really thought about that half a carrot you threw away? Or because you cut 2 inches off the end of that carrot and threw that end away, and really you had another whole, you know, probably a couple of ounces to use. You know, again, not everybody in your establishment is going to think about the small dollars that's going to cost you to be in business. So all of that plays a part into your food costs, and you have to calculate that. You have to factor that in. The other thing, talking about your labor costs. Labor costs is pretty relative in the fact that if you have hourly employees, If they work 8 hours a day and you're paying them $10 an hour, that's going to be $80 a day. Okay, that is flat out $80 a day. So if you have somebody on salary, you have to factor that in. If you're paying them $40,000 a year, I want a job making $40,000 a year, but anyway, you have to factor that in. All of that is part of your menu pricing. And again, I won't go over the other operating cost, operating expenses or operating costs there. Now, choosing a pricing strategy. There's actually 3 of them there. You got your profit-orientated pricing, your sales-orientated pricing, and your status quo. I want to start with status quo. Status quo means you're charging what your competitors are charging. So you're really you're checking out your local market. You're comparing yourself, again, apples to apples. You're not a quick service comparing yourself to a fine dining. You are a casual comparing yourself to a casual, right? So status quo. Joe Blow is, and I think there was a chart in here. Let me see if I can find it. I'm almost positive it was in here somewhere. That there is a chart, maybe not, on status quo. Yeah, I don't see it right now, so I won't spend a lot of time looking for it. So, you know, this steakhouse may be charging $20 for a steak. The other steakhouse may be charging $23.50. The other steakhouse, $19. So you're comparing all these prices, and then you're deciding to fall somewhere in that vicinity or pricing. So that's status quo. You are matching what your competitors are offering. Now again, hopefully you've got some sort of niche or some sort of attraction or some sort of elevated service, some sort of benefit that is going to bring those customers to you versus the competitor. Okay, now profit orientated. All right, profit orientated is a strategy. All right, pricing is a strategy. Target profit drives prices. So what you anticipate your profits being, that's what your menu pricing is gearing towards. Okay, so you can look at that and read that in detail, because basically, let's be real, increase revenue, your sales. To do that, you can offer delivery, you can offer merchandising, catering, things of that nature. There's things that you can do to increase revenue, to increase your profit. All right, now sales orientated. The drawback to sales-orientated pricing strategy is that although it may lead to increased sales, it also may not lead to increased profits. All right, you need to pay attention to that. This goal is to maximize the sales volume. All right, so services may be limited. There's no extra amenity provided. The product is easily produced. The cost of providing the product can be kept low. So that would be sales orientated. You're using the cheapest ingredients to produce an item. Okay? And that may not necessarily increase your sales. That's what I'm going to equate that to. Let's go back to the cupcake, okay? You may use cheap ingredients to keep your, to increase your profit margin, but then, or to increase your sales. I shouldn't say profit margin, I should say increase your sales, but then potentially what could happen is your customer base is limited, or you can't afford delivery as a benefit, or you know, it can be counterproductive. So again, you need to look at that. Now let's talk about calculating selling prices. This is where honestly it can get a little confusing. I would say that the percentage pricing method to me is the easiest, because it simply is, and I've got it up here for you. All right, your first you got to determine your food cost percentage, all right? So your food cost percentage will always be food cost over your divided by your selling price. That will give you your food cost. Guess what? Your labor cost, okay, percentage would be your labor cost divided by your selling price. That would give you your labor cost percentage, all right? Your operating cost divided by your selling price, that's going to give you your labor cost percentage. So don't get caught up in this. Keep your formulas simple, all right? So to find your percentage, again, for this purpose, food cost divided by your selling price is your food cost percentage. Now, in the percentage pricing method, and I need to move y'all down just a little bit so you can see the next one there. In your food cost percentage pricing method, food cost divided by the food cost percentage, what you discovered here, is going to equal your selling price, okay? So what I need you to do on page 141, I want you to, number one, highlight your food cost percentage there at the bottom, divided by your food cost divided by your food cost percentage equals your selling price. Now to the right of that, I need you to write this formula because you need to figure out how to get that food cost percentage, all right? So make sure you've underlined this, the bottom of 141, all right, right there at the bottom. Either underline it, highlight it, whatever makes it easier for you to see, recognize, and go back to. And then to the right, make sure you put food cost divided by selling price equals your food cost percentage. Now, let's go ahead and flip over because you're going to see a whole bunch of words and a whole bunch of formulas. Guess what? A lot of these are repetitive, but then they're also interchanging those to come up with the different scenarios. So like food cost divided by the selling price, I already told you that is food cost percentage. Well, food cost divided by your food cost percentage equals your selling price, all right? Or selling price times your food cost percentage equals your food cost. So what they're doing is they're interchanging these to come up with the different answers. So don't get confused with that. It's not a multitude of different formulas that you need to memorize. Just understand that they're rearranging those items within that formula to come up with a different answer to whatever the item is. All right, so let's move on to the margin pricing method. Now, the contribution margin pricing method, that short CM, okay, for contribution margin, is what's left over after the food cost of menu item is subtracted from the menu item, the menu selling price, okay? So they're taking the menu selling price, they're deducting the cost of the food cost, and then that is giving them it's giving them your average contribution margin per customer, okay? So you can read through that. If you have any questions on that, I'll be glad to dive into that a little more specifically. I don't want to take up too much time today within this lecture, but I want you to definitely look at step one. You're going to calculate the average CM per customer. You're going to take your non-food cost, okay? Your non-food cost plus your profit divided by your number of customers. So definitely look into that one, all right? Now the other one is your prime cost. That is your labor cost plus your food cost divided by your target labor cost percentage plus your target food cost percentage. That's going to equal your selling price, All right, so you can look at them steps. Again, if you have any questions, we can go into that deeper, because it definitely can be challenging. But just kind of read through these first. I want to see if you have or gain an understanding. And then if you come back to me and several of you have questions on the specifics of these pricing methods, I will come back and do a separate video, or we can do a life size together and dive into each one of these individually and give you a bunch of examples for that. Also, don't forget the ratio pricing method. So take a look at that one. As for today, that's the end of this lesson or this lecture for chapter 6. I don't have any other comments. Make sure you follow through with your review your learnings. Make sure you're paying attention to those review your learnings, because that is where your final exam comes from. And other than that, if you have any questions, again, I'm always here. Feel free to reach out to me. If you text me, please put your name to it so I'll know who it is. Also, if you call and I don't answer because I don't recognize the number, you know, we all kind of we monitor our phone calls, and we typically scan them. If we don't know who it is, we don't answer. So if you call and I don't answer, leave me a message and I'll return your phone call. Identify yourself and I'll return your phone call. Again, have a great day or evening. I'm not sure if you're watching this in the morning or night. And I look forward to talking with you again for our next lesson, chapter 7. All right, I'm signing off now. Y'all have a great day. Bye-bye.